Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 3:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, top of the next hour, David Strom from Hot Air joins us at 4 o'clock. 4:30, we talk to a Black Hawk crew chief and flight instructor, Mark Matheron, who's going to give us his reaction to the latest information we're learning on this horrific accident this week between that helicopter and that commercial airliner right off of Reagan National Airport. Then E.J. Antoni joins us at 5:30. We talk the economy with him. We talk tariffs with him. President Trump's plan to buy out federal workers. A lot to discuss. And we'll talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The questions about how something like this could happen remain. That helicopter striking, that Black Hawk helicopter striking that American Airlines flight. The President of the United States this morning posting to Truth Social that, quote, the Black Hawk helicopter was flying too high by a lot. It was far above the 200-foot limit. That's not really too complicated to understand, is it? He posts, emphasizing yet again that the early information suggests that Black Hawk was higher than the 200-foot ceiling that those helicopters are supposed to be at as they traverse that area of the Potomac River right near Reagan National Airport. They're supposed to stay low so that they can stay under all that incoming and outgoing traffic from Reagan National. The president saying that today. This story, it seems like we're getting a lot more information today. And a lot of it squares up with what we've been learning from helicopter pilots who work this area or who have worked this area through the years. And in fact, we now have a report today from the New York Times that the Black Hawk, the Army Black Hawk helicopter, seemed to have been both too high and too far over the Potomac River. Normally, when it's on that route, it's supposed to be hugging the shoreline on the eastern side of the Potomac River, but the helicopter was not doing that. The helicopter was a little high and it was a little in over the top of the river, and the end result was that it was right in the pathway of that American Airlines flight as it was attempting to land on that runway 33 at Reagan National Airport. Here's what the New York Times says this afternoon. Clues emerging from the moments before the deadly collision Wednesday night between an Army helicopter and an American Airlines passenger jet suggest that multiple layers of the country's aviation safety apparatus failed, according to flight recordings, a preliminary internal report from the FAA, interviews with current and former air traffic controllers, and others briefed on the matter. The helicopter flew outside of its approved flight path. The American Airlines pilots most likely did not see the helicopter close by as they made a turn toward the runway, and the air traffic controller, who was juggling two jobs at the same time, was unable to keep the helicopter and the plane separated. Now, if you were listening to our program yesterday, you'll know that we kind of anticipated all of the explanations that we're now officially receiving from these reports out of the FAA through the New York Times. That it looked like things kind of lined up in a very deeply unfortunate way. From the helicopter being slightly off course to being a little too high, the air traffic controller not clearly conveying that this plane was coming in specifically on that runway 33, not forcing that helicopter and plane to stay distant from one another. A lot of problems in here, a lot of problems. An FAA spokesman said the agency couldn't comment on the ongoing investigation, which is being led by the National Transportation Safety Board. Crash investigators will spend the next several months reviewing flight data, recordings from inside the cockpits, weather patterns, as well as interviewing controllers and others involved trying to figure out what went wrong. But the catastrophe already appeared to confirm what pilots and air traffic controllers and safety experts have been warning for years. Growing holes in the aviation system could lead to the kind of crash that left 67 people dead in the Potomac River in Washington. They say there were signs Wednesday that pilots and air traffic controllers at Reagan were not operating under optimal conditions. The duties of handling air traffic control for helicopters and for planes at Reagan National on Wednesday night were combined before the deadly crash. That left an air traffic controller handling two different roles, dual roles, according to a person briefed on the staffing in the report. Typically, one person handles both the helicopter and the plane duties after 9:30 p.m., after 9:30 in the evening. That's when traffic at Reagan begins to lessen. But the supervisor combined those duties sometime before 9:30 and allowed one air traffic controller to leave, according to the person, who was not authorized to speak publicly about the investigation into the crash. The crash occurred just before 9 p.m., so that would be well over half an hour before they normally would subtract an air traffic controller and combine those roles. While there were no unusual factors causing a distraction for controllers that night, staffing was, quote, not normal for the time of day and the volume of traffic, the preliminary FAA report said. On Thursday, 5 current and former controllers said that the controller in the tower should have more proactively directed the helicopter and the plane to fly away from each other. Instead, the controller asked the helicopter to steer clear of the plane. Some of the current and former controllers said the darkness could have made it more difficult for pilots to accurately gauge the distance between themselves and other aircraft. Some wondered whether the helicopter pilots mistook a different plane for the American jet. The helicopter was supposed to be flying closer to the bank of the Potomac River and lower to the ground as it traversed the busy Reagan National Airspace. 4 people who have been briefed on the incident all said. Before a helicopter can enter any busy commercial airspace, it must get the approval of the air traffic controller. In this case, the pilot asked for permission to use a specific predetermined route that lets helicopters fly at a low altitude along the bank on the east side of the Potomac, a location that would have let it avoid the American Airlines plane. The requested route, referred to as Route 4 at Reagan National, followed a specific path known to the air traffic controller and the helicopter pilots. The helicopter confirmed visual sight of a regional jet. We heard that in the air traffic control audio. The helicopter confirmed visual sight of a regional jet, and the air traffic controller instructed the helicopter to follow the route and fly behind the plane. But the helicopter did not follow the intended route, the people briefed on the matter said. Rather, it was above 300 feet. Remember the number that we were using. 200 is the ceiling for that area. The New York Times says that, according to investigators, the helicopter was above 300 feet when it was supposed to be flying below 200, and it was at least a half mile off of the approved route when it collided with the commercial jet. A half mile. Now that surprises me that it could be that far off, a half mile, but apparently it was, according to this report. And that, I mean, obviously, you don't have to be a physicist. You don't have to have aviation experience to understand what that does in 3D space. You're flying above where you're allowed to be and further over the water than you should be. And the end result is that you're in the danger zone. You are in a very dangerous space that you are not supposed to be in. A senior Army official urged caution in making any assessments until the helicopter's black box could be recovered and analyzed, along with other forensic data. The official, who spoke on condition of anonymity because of the ongoing inquiry, said the Black Hawk's pilots had flown this route before and were well aware of the altitude restrictions and the tight air corridor that they were permitted to fly in near the airport. Safety lapses in aviation have been increasing for years, leading to an alarming pattern of close calls in the skies and at airports involving commercial airlines. They have occurred amid rising congestion at the country's busiest airports. That includes Reagan National, where the frequent presence of military flights makes controlling traffic even more complicated. The Times goes on to point out here that air traffic controllers are often understaffed, overworked, and fatigued as well. Now, this also gets to the point that the president has been making in the last 48 hours, which is he's concerned about the FAA's commitment to hiring air traffic controllers who are of the utmost competence, who merit the job. We've seen absolutely ridiculous attempts by the past Democrat presidents, Obama and Biden, to try and staff up places like the FAA and air traffic controllers with people on the basis of their appearance, of their immutable characteristics, of their gender. Absurd standards by which you would hire an air traffic controller. That's irrelevant. I don't care I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care what your weight is. I don't care about any of that. Your gender, that's irrelevant. It comes down entirely to, are you the best person for this job? Do we have the best talent pool available from which to pick the absolute cream of the crop to do a job that this week we received a reminder of is deeply important? Lives hang in the balance based on who does that job. And so President Trump, obviously very right to address this. Let me see here. I've got a couple of things. Today, I got Caroline Leavitt talking from the White House, of course, the White House press secretary. And here's a question from Peter Ducey about the air traffic controller that was involved this week. Were they hired on the basis of something other than merit?
The air traffic controller in the DCA tower on Wednesday night hired or not fired at some point because of his or her race?
That investigation is ongoing. And so when we have updates on the exact individuals who were involved in the collision, including the air traffic controller, also the pilots of the helicopter and others, we will confirm those. I don't want to confirm names from this podium today. We're not in a position to do that. But I will say the president has still rightfully pointed out that there has been problems with the aviation industry over the past several years.
There have been problems over the last several years. We've seen a deterioration of the standards, Caroline Leavitt said today.
The president was asked and answered this yesterday, and he believes that it is still indeed safe, and Americans should feel safe traveling our skies. With that said, two things can be true at the same time, and we certainly have seen the deterioration of federal hiring standards at the Federal Aviation Administration, and the president wants to increase those standards. He wants pilots in this country who have the great responsibility of flying American citizens by the tens of millions every single day to be chosen for that position based on their merit and their skills.
Yeah, it makes common sense to me, which is why the left hasn't been pursuing it. They've been attacking in the opposite direction. Kevin is calling in from Manassas right now on line 3. Kevin, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show.
Hey, Vince, what you just reported is astonishing to me because I had heard on WMAL yesterday, I believe, someone, I forget who it was, had some expert on their show, and I believe they said that the minimal distance allowed between these aircraft is a quarter mile, and you just said that that helicopter, according to sources, was a half mile from where it was supposed to be. My question is, how in the world were not alarms going off in their systems, their computer systems at the tower, and how was someone not screaming for that helicopter to move? It's you don't, like you said, you don't have to be a person who knows everything about this and is in the aviation to say that there's something wrong there.
Yeah, this if you look at the available images, there are maps available that you can see what these helicopter pilots have to follow when they're flying in DC airspace, the track that they follow, and this Route 4 that they were following the evening of, or they were supposed to be the evening 2 nights ago. When that helicopter was traveling, they're supposed to be hugging the shoreline of the Potomac on the eastern side of that shore. And according to these reports now from the preliminary details, that helicopter was, they claim, a half mile off of the designated route, which is stunning if that's the case. That's a lot of space between where they're supposed to be and where they actually were. But it helps to give us an impression of how could something like this happen? They apparently had entered a very dangerous space and they were flying too high. And that all adds up to the catastrophe that we saw this week, Kevin.
Yes, and I think the idea that staffing shortages played a role is a very logical thing. No one knows for sure, but it amazes me because I watched. Unfortunately, I was in a place where someone had CNN on today, and I watched a little bit of it. And they're already starting with, "Oh, Trump's accusing he's being racist because he said DEI might have played a role or whatever." And it's sickening because obviously people are making bad decisions, whether it's DEI or whether it's people that don't know the regulations well enough, or they're just cutting corners and not holding up the standards that are there already to protect us from these things. it's a logical way to go, and I think the mainstream media once again is just being disgusting by trying to make something out of Trump said that is obviously not what he's saying. He's just saying our standards have been lowered.
Well, they're trying to stick Trump with this, and obviously President Trump is the president of the United States. He has been for just about almost 2 weeks as of Monday next week. But what President Trump is doing, he's picking up the pieces of a federal government that Joe Biden left in shambles. And what I'm hearing from helicopter pilots who, again, have flown this route, who know it, they're saying it is unacceptable to be at 350 feet, to be that high. Completely unacceptable. So something slipped hard, and getting answers to that is going to be really important. Hey, Kevin, thank you. Appreciate that call. All right, let's get Russell from Woodbridge in here, line 2. Hello, Russell. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hello, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, the point I wanted to make is this. I'm 73 years old. I've been flying in and out of that airport for 70 years. It was built for the convenience of the Congress and the Senate before Dulles and BWI and all those other airports were born. Right. Not to mention the fact that at least 10 military airports within 5 miles of there where those helicopters can land if they didn't mind making a general's ride 5 minutes in a car to get where they want to go.
Uh-huh.
So if you've ever flown in and out of there, you know you can look out the window of your jet and watch other planes fly under and above you so close you could probably recognize the person in the seat. It's an accident waiting to happen. It's too busy. It's too small. It wasn't designed for that, and it's for the convenience of the Congress and the Senate. We don't have to have commercial flights in and out of there.
Yeah, that's why there's been conversations in the past about whether or not to continue operating it as the airport it is now. Members of Congress keep winning out on that question for the convenience. It's only a couple minutes car ride right to the Capitol building. And here we stand with a big disaster that definitely could have been avoided. We know that. All right, coming up, President Trump taking a lot of actions today. His very busy presidency continues. He's banished pronouns. We'll talk about that. That's ahead. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 3:36 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, David Strom joins us at the top of the hour. We've got a lot to talk about, including the Democrats are definitely not learning their lesson from the election at all, which is great. And then at 4:30, Mark McKeithron will be with us. He's a former Black Hawk crew chief. He'll give us his sense of the latest of what we're learning about that horrific crash over the Potomac River Wednesday evening. And then E.J. Antoni, our in-house economist, is here as we take a closer look at President Trump's economic actions this week, including offering federal workers buyouts. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Line 3 is where we find Bob calling in from Burke right now. Bob, good afternoon. You are on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm good, sir.
Hey, just a quick note. I voted for Donald twice. I voted for him again on economics and all that. I worked at National many years ago, also at Dulles Air Traffic Control, both tower and radar. And my only comments to some of the listeners who are making comments would be, don't try to speak up too much until you know what's going on. The NTSB does a phenomenal job with their accident reports. I know what the preliminary stuff is saying. So it's pilots are always the first at the scene of an accident is an axiom that is true. And as far as the air traffic controller in the tower, again, don't jump to a ton of conclusions. Keep the politics out of it, because that lady or gentleman is going through hell right now. I can assure you of that.
And also, whoever that air traffic controller was who left early, and that supervisor who dismissed that air traffic controller early, combining the job down for the helicopter traffic and the airplane traffic down to one person much too soon. Everybody involved, I would hope, is doing a bit of soul searching right now on how all of this went down.
I would imagine that they are, but again, when I heard the news about it, I don't even want to really get into watching the videos or anything like that.
Right.
I've lost guys on frequency. I worked during September 11th when the guys hit the Pentagon. and what the controller's going through as far as PTSD is not like somebody that's in a combat zone and watch their friend blow up in their face. But I can assure you, losing somebody on frequency the way any of us have is not something that you want to recount. As far as the combination of the positions, it is not an unusual scenario, and I'm not going to get into any of that stuff. But, again, I enjoy listening to your show because of the moderation that you do. You listen to any sides. This is not a political comment. I would just encourage many of your listeners not to go ahead and make the judgments because NTSB is going to come up with something that will be correct.
So, Bob, are you concerned at all about the hiring standards at the FAA and how they've been changed through the years, especially by the Obama and Biden administrations?
Anybody should be, but it's not a discussion for that person on the position at the moment. There's X number of families, whatever it might be, 67 families that are, involved with horrific nightmare of losing a family member and the control line. Anyway, I know you've got a heck of a lot of other callers.
No, but I'm asking. No, but I'm glad you're calling because you've got the experience of having worked in this in a very chaotic environment where you're asked to do a lot of really important things. And so in other words, you do have some concern about the hiring practices. And look, here's the thing. Yes. We're going to find out, of course, as you point out, more as this investigation wears on, and then we'll actually get some real answers as to what led to it. But asking these questions about safety standards and the kinds of people who are put in these important roles, you can see why people are doing that right now in light of this disaster. They want to make sure that we don't see any repeats in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt safety should always be considered, whether it's as a result of this accident, whether it's a result of just everyday business. Always look for the best that you can have on the job, whether it's ATC or anywhere else. No, you're 100% correct on that. I just hope that some people won't jump on this. And as I said, I didn't call regardless of politics because I've made my votes in the past. Yeah. But I just hope that some people will back off some of the stuff. The pilot may have deviated. Who knows? Be careful with your assumptions is a perfectly good piece of advice always. Thank you, Michael. Excuse me, Bob. Thank you for that. Appreciate that call. All right. You take care. Bye. That's Bob calling in from Burke. He's worked in air traffic control. You heard him say both at Reagan and Dulles, so he's seen it all. There was an air traffic controller, Corey. This is an air traffic controller, right? Michael Pearson, on the Fox News channel. He was talking about this very subject about to the talent pool and populating the FAA and the fact that the left has had it under attack.
This is a preventable disaster. The system has been under attack through the DEI and the FAA bowing to wokeness since 2010, since the Obama administration. The lack of staffing is directly attributable to the Obama administration terminating the lists of eligible, well-trained air traffic control statements in 36 universities across the country in 2013 because they were too white. The FAA also, at the same time, implemented an immunity program. So you think you're seeing legitimate statistics, you're not. In the old days, before 2010, the immunity program, if an air traffic controller got two airplanes too close, too many times, they would be decertified and retrained. Now, they're not. Now, they're not. To his point, the New York Post has a piece up today reminding everyone that the FAA is right now in the midst of a lawsuit that it was turning applicants down on the basis of their race, that they were using skin color as a means to filter out applicants to the FAA. The headline, FAA embroiled in lawsuit alleging it turned away 1,000 applicants based on race. That contributed to staffing woes. The Federal Aviation Administration is fighting a class action lawsuit alleging it denied 1,000 would-be air traffic controllers jobs because of diversity hiring targets. This, as it was revealed that staffing levels were not even normal at the time of this week's deadly mid-air collision. Complaints about the FAA's hiring policies resurfaced after this horrific crash this weekend. Details of the litigation reemerged, too, as Andrew Brigida, the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit that was filed in 2015, suggested that the FAA's obsession with diversity hiring and inclusion had only ensured
that an accident was likely to happen. The crux of the lawsuit is that the FAA, under Obama, dropped a skill-based system for hiring controllers and replaced it with a, quote, biographical assessment in an alleged bid to boost the number of minority job applicants. Brigida, who is white, alleges that he was discriminated against solely based on his race when his application was rejected. The would-be air traffic controller, who graduated from Arizona State University's Collegiate Training Initiative in 2013, was turned down for a job even though he had scored 100% on his training exam, the lawsuit alleges. The lawsuit adds to the mounting criticism that the FAA has faced this week over its hiring policies. Then they go to President Trump's remarks on the subject this week. Asked if he thought years of diversity hiring ensured that an aviation accident was bound to happen, Brigida told The Telegraph, quote, yes, that's kind of accurate. Very, very concerned there. Also, I've got this audio for you. This dates back a couple of years when Tucker Carlson had his Fox News program, and he was talking about the war on standards that the left has been leading.
A biographical questionnaire whose purpose was not hiring skilled controllers. In fact, the more skills you had, the fewer points you got, perversely. But instead, the point was ensuring the hiring of people who were of the right race. It was insane, of course, dangerous, yes, and it sparked a major reaction. Now, the Department of Transportation says it is ready to revise those policies in the name of public safety. Stephen Bradbury is the General Counsel of the Department of Transportation, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Bradbury, thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me on, Tucker.
So it was a pretty simple story, and I think the fix is pretty simple. Can you assure our viewers that air traffic controllers will be hired solely on the basis of relevant criteria? In other words, how good they are at air traffic controlling, and not on the basis of irrelevant criteria like their appearance?
That's right. We're making a change to no longer use that biographical assessment that the FAA has used since 2014 and that you featured on your show.
All right, so that was basically Tucker calling attention to this during the Trump era as the Trump team was trying to reverse all of the garbage that the left had put in place. Of course, Joe Biden appears in office and things become garbagey again. In fact, remember, here is Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz, questioning Joe Biden's nominee for FAA administrator back in 2023, just 2 years ago.
You ever flown a plane?
Thank you for the question, Senator. No, I have never flown a plane.
So you weren't a military pilot or a commercial airline pilot?
No, Senator.
Have you ever worked for an airline?
No, Senator.
Have you ever worked as an air traffic controller?
No, Senator.
Have you ever worked for a company that manufactures airplanes?
No, Senator.
Have you ever worked for a company that fixes airplanes?
No, Senator.
FAA administrator is a specialized position. I'm not qualified to be FAA administrator. I have no idea how to fly a plane. No one in their right mind would put me in charge of aviation safety because I don't have that experience. I suspect most of the members of this committee are in a similar position. The American people, when they think about aviation safety, when they think about, I played in this committee, a Southwest Airlines and FedEx plane almost colliding at Austin's airport. They want an FAA administrator who knows why those planes crash and knows how to fix it to keep them safe. And with all respect, Mr. Washington, it gives no comfort to the flying public that their pilot might be a transgendered witch, but doesn't actually know how to prevent the plane from crashing into the ground and killing them. I believe your record is woefully lacking. And in fact, you have zero aviation safety experience.
That nominee would end up being defeated and withdrawn from consideration by President Biden. That was in March of 2023. But kind of a sign on where the Biden administration was on this subject. Didn't really have their eye on the ball at all. Let's see. Wayne is calling in from Reston, line 6. Wayne, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Colonnade Show.
Good afternoon, Vince. Yeah, I just want to remind everybody about an incident that happened in 2011 at DCA. I'm a airline pilot that's flown in and out of Reagan National many, many times, and a colleague of mine was on his approach into the airport and wasn't able to contact the controller for 25 minutes because he had fallen asleep. At that time, they only required one controller in the tower at the time, and I believe it was Ray LaHood was the administrator at the time. After that, said there'd be no longer just a single controller in the tower. So DCA has been understaffed for a very, very long time, and it's such a busy airport with so much traffic, as everybody says. You just need the help.
This was a friend of yours. He was flying a commercial plane. He calls into the air traffic control tower, and he gets no response?
Correct. Yeah, you can Google it. There's an article that says how two aircraft landed unassisted in Washington after ATC fell asleep.
I'm looking at it right now. I'm looking at an ABC News report from back then. Air traffic controller asleep on duty at Reagan National, NTSB says. And it says here, an air traffic controller at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport fell asleep on duty early Wednesday morning, leaving the control tower silent and forcing pilots of two commercial planes to land on their own, the National Transportation Safety Board said today. The controller, who had 20 years of experience, including 17 at Reagan National, was suspended early Thursday by the FAA while the investigation proceeds. The words human fatigue appear in this article. So two planes had to land on their own. That's pretty unusual, isn't it?
It is very unusual for a major airport. We have procedures for landing at what they would call a non-towered airport, but it's so unusual for that to happen at a major airport that it's just not something you expect. You're talking to the approach controller before you turn over to the tower, and the approach controller can tell you if there's any other aircraft in the area. My colleague elected to land. He was questioned why he landed, but he treated it like it would any other airport that was not controlled by a controller at the time, and it was fine. They just wanted to know why he did it, and they wanted to know what had happened.
Yeah, and
it's chronically understaffed, and it's just a shame because they're adding more airplanes, they're adding more flights, and the only reason they're able to make all these extra flights work is by using that runway 33, because they can have an airplane land on that runway, and they'll put you in what they call it line up and wait on the runway 1. As soon as the person crosses the runway and landing on 33, you get your clearance for takeoff. Without that runway, they're not going to be able to continue to put more flights into and out of DCA.
Huh. Yeah. And by the way, I should mention, I've been talking to some helicopter pilots about what they've experienced here. And one of the things I have heard is that the guys who do work traditionally at Reagan, the air traffic controllers, highly competent, highly professional, really talented, a lot of those guys. So I don't want to take anything away from them, but there's clearly some issues here.
No, I definitely wouldn't. I'll back up everything they say. They're true professionals. They do a tremendous job with the small amount of airspace that they have and small amount of taxiway, runway, and all the flights that go in and out. Yeah, they do a fantastic job. But we're all human. We all suffer from fatigue. We can get overloaded, overwhelmed. That's why there are at least two of us in the flight deck at all times. Catch each other's mistake.
And one other analogy I heard from a helicopter pilot about kind of the circumstances by which this plane can run into this helicopter, and the helicopter didn't know where it was coming from. It was just a lot of this. Some of this was just unusual. It was very unusual, and I was told that it's kind of like how you can back up out of your driveway the same way every single day your whole life, and all of a sudden your wife parks the car somewhere she never parks it, and you don't anticipate it, and bam, you run into it in your own driveway. And you say, why did she park there? You're just not used to it. The muscle memory is completely different. And I was like, I understand that analogy. I get that. And you can see how something like this might happen.
And the helicopters flying down the river are not very easy to see. Their color, they're like a grayish color, and they blend in with everything. So the lights aren't nearly as bright as the lights that we typically see on the airliners. And it's just difficult to pick them out from everything else that's around there. Plus, you've got some other things that you're paying attention to as well. You're still scanning for traffic, but they're meant to blend in. which isn't very helpful for the pilots.
Yeah, no, it's been a really wild and tragic week to see all this. Hey, thank you, Wayne. Just like so many of the other great pilots calling in, I really appreciate your insights on this. Thank you, sir.